Good morning, Lee.
It's time for another peek inside. What are we peeking at today?
Oh, we're going to peek at the dreaded due diligence clause.
Oh, that old chestnut.
Dun-dun-dun. You might recall that in previous episodes we've talked about the conditions that a buyer may require to insert into a contract of sale to protect their interests or mitigate risk.
Yep.
We've talked about conditions. So the most common conditions are, number one, finance, where the buyer may need final approval from a lender to ensure there's sufficient funds to complete the purchase or the transaction. Generally, most lenders need up to 14 to 21 days to carry out their final checks and balances to fully approve the funds for the buyer. The other big one is building inspection clause. Now, we talked about this condition very recently. Do you remember we chatted about that?
Well, you were saying that a lot of your mainland buyers are doing it just straight off the cuff.
Well, you've got to have them.
In Tasmania, we're quite...
When I first started here, people weren't as open to it.
We tend to tick the no box, don't we?
That's right. Yeah. Well, now... most people are doing them. So you've got building inspections. Now, the buyer and the lender need to be satisfied that the dwelling is in good structural order and condition, and there's no major question marks around its physical integrity. So today's topic is about another condition that some lawyers like to sneak in to add another layer of angst for sellers and their agents. It's what I call the dreaded due diligence clause.
Why do you say dreaded?
Mate, it puts the fear of you-know-what into vendors and agents, and here's why. Now, it does have its place in some transactions. There's no two ways about it. Primarily, the most common use is when, say, a developer wants to purchase a property to convert into maybe multiple dwellings or cut it up into smaller blocks. The due diligence clause is inserted into the contract at the buyer's request to enable them to carry out checks and inquiries with, say, the local council, utility providers, and possibly environmental groups to make sure there are no impediments to them carrying out the project through to completion.
Right.
So most developers are sophisticated buyers. They have usually carried out some initial due diligence to get them to a position where they are confident enough to make an offer and get an agreement with the sellers of that property subject to a satisfactory outcome of a due diligence clause. Are we following that?
I think so.
Okay. Now, these clauses should take no more than about 90 days to complete or be satisfied. Here is the downside for the seller with the DD clause, the due diligence clause.
Or DDD, the dreaded due diligence.
Yeah, the DDD.
Triple D.
The due diligence clause is usually worded in such a way that if anything, and I mean anything, does not stack up for the buyer during their due diligence searches, they can leave the contract without penalty. So in other words, they get their deposit back and not necessarily have to declare what that issue was. It's just the DD was unsatisfactory.
Yep.
Okay. Now, their lawyer may simply declare that the search was search or whatever it was unsatisfactory and the contract's at an end. It's a tough call for any seller.
Especially if they're banking on that particular sale,
Yeah. So when I get a lawyer requesting a due diligence clause for a straight-out single-dwelling home purchase on a block of land, my spidey senses switch on and I go into bat on behalf of my sellers. I immediately ask the buyer why they require a due diligence clause. What are you looking for?
Yep.
9 times out of 10, the buyer says, I don't know, my lawyer just said I should put it in. Okay, understood. Now remember, a due diligence clause allows a buyer to leave a contract without penalty simply by declaring the searches pertaining to the due diligence clause were unsatisfactory. Could be any part of it. So my investigations swing to the buyer's lawyer to find out what specific searches do they want to carry out. Now, once I understand what searches they do want carried out, I ask them to specifically declare what they are and ask that they make the clause specific to what that search or searches are, not just a blanket, as I like to call it, get-out clause. So key here is communication. I completely understand that buyers need to be certain that they are mitigating any potential risk and don't want to get landed with a dud. And their lawyers are representing them accordingly. However, I want to know on behalf of my sellers what concerns the buyers and their lawyers may have in regards to the property that a building inspection may not necessarily show up or standard council searches may not reveal. Putting myself in the shoes of a buyer, no stone should go unturned. But All parties need to know what stones you want to look under and why. The scattergun approach of a due diligence clause can provide an easy way out for any buyer. So something here you may want to know, Lee. Despite the somewhat challenging conditions, we have basically sold all the properties on our books and appraising quite a few for the much anticipated spring selling season.
Very good. So, if a homeowner is curious about what their home may be worth or prepping for a move, what should they do?
They just need to give us a call. We can run them through the A to Z of what they need to do. So it's just give me a buzz on 0400 180 515 or just go to our website, alversonrealestate.com.
Just don't mention DD. Good on you, mate. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, mate.
Craig at Alverson Real Estate with another Peak Insight.